I've worked in Las Vegas a couple of times bodyguarding. I hate Las Vegas. It's not like, people want to go to Las Vegas and I got my hand up first talking about let's go to Las Vegas. It's just Las Vegas has been more of a pitfall and bad memories for me than anything else. Michael Moore told me to get out of Vegas. He says, get your stuff, Frank, get out of the hotel. Don't tell no one anything. If Reggie and them call you, don't call them back. Don't answer your phone. Just leave. Get the hell out of Vegas. And ironically, as I was driving home, Reggie Wright called me and he goes, hey, Suge, want to talk to you. So I take the phone call and it's Suge and he goes, hey, Frank. He goes, man, I know that, this has bothered you. I know that you're upset. We're all upset. Why don't you come over to the house tomorrow? We're going to take the boat and jet skis and go out to Lake Mead and, go jet skiing and stuff like that, right? I told Suge, I said, I'm halfway home. I said, I'm just about back home. And he was like, oh, okay, And then that was the end of it. Now, what was his motive for wanting to tell me to come to Lake Mead, let's go get on the jet skis and, go boating and stuff like this? Well, it could have been another headline. Frank Alexander dies in Lake Mead from a boating accident or jet ski accident, something like that.
For a short period of time, in the wake of the Shakur and Wallace killings, it looked like Death Row Records was living up to the hype about being untouchable. It had helped create a narrative being fed to the Vegas police, and at the same time, it was misdirecting Vegas away from interviewing key Death Row employee witnesses who were there on the night of the shooting. It had broken ties with any bodyguard who had personally interacted with Shakur for plausible deniability in any negligence investigation, and now they were aligned with a silenced Los Angeles Police Department. But there was one detective that had already been exposed to cops who were not who they said they were. So when Reggie tried to work the same friendly informant routine that he had with other departments, this guy wasn't having any of it. He actually drew a connection between that veneer and possible involvement in the Wallace homicide. His name was Russell Poole.
As soon as I took over the Biggie case, immediately start seeing connections between corrupt LAPD officers and the death row organization. Some guys were working for Reggie Wright Jr., but what I was more concerned about was that we had our cops hanging out with drug dealing felons.
Unlike shows that have shown Russ to be a lone wolf, it wasn't like that at all. He wasn't obsessed with wall-mounted items, showing how obsessed he was with a case. It was nothing like that. Russ was a family guy. He loved his children.
There are two individuals, or actually three individuals, who speak about Russ Poole and his specific investigation of the murder of Biggie. And one is a guy by the name of Sergio Robledo, who you could make a case might be one of the most respected LAPD homicide investigators to ever walk the earth. And he loved Russ Poole. He said Russ Poole's work was impeccable, and Russ was right.
Russell was a family man, and he was a devoted detective. He was committed to finding the truth the way he felt that he would want on any case relating to anybody in his family.
He was very, very dedicated, and I don't care who the victim was, that Russ was going to find out who did it.
The kind of work he did took him away a lot. But when he was home, he was home. and very much was, a family guy.
He was already a detective. His normal shift, Monday through Friday. A lot of times he would come home at night, 5, 6, 7 o'clock. We got into the riots in '92. There was a point, I think he had already been on shift for a while, got home. I think, my mom said he even had a couple of beers already, and he got called right back in and was gone for at least 48 hours, because they were all on tactical alert. And this stuff was happening in that South Bureau homicide area where he worked, so they had to make sense of, because I know murders were still happening during the riots in that area.
Russ and I met at South Bureau Homicide, and when I came, he was already there when I got there.
And he was working as hard and as much as they were. There was a period of time where one year they had an extra amount of homicides.
It was just record-breaking. Newton homicide in 1 year. You're talking about a 2 or 3 square mile division that had 125 murders in 1 year. It was unheard of.
In the first year that I was there, they had 429 murders of young people, which is an alarming amount by anybody's standard. Certainly today, the whole city don't have that many.
Working South Bureau Homicide when Russ Poole was there and I was there, it was a record break. I had 325 murders in 1 year. You were never home.
So we had approximately 21 teams of homicide investigators, 22, 23 teams, and Russ was in one of them.
I didn't know Sergio to start with. I know he was the lieutenant and the head of South Bureau Homicide, their unit, and Russ would talk about him and tell him what a wonderful man he was, and very experienced, and knew his stuff, and he could go to him about anything.
I want you to
understand
keep perspective
right.
on this, okay?
No.
We need to get to the truth on who assaulted him, and I want you to tell me the truth.
Right.
What Hewitt told you and what other officers have told you.
Russ was the type of individual that would get there before work. I know that sometimes when I had spent the night working on other murders, and he would be coming in for his tour, he would be there early, make sure that he chatted with everyone. He had to know what was going on. He was conversing with the senior detectives that were there, other detectives, and also working on his own cases.
If and when somebody gets booked for this assault on this guy, we're going to be going to court, and some people are going to be testifying in a court of law, okay? Perjury is a very serious thing to me. I would never lie.
We had this whole conversation.
Okay.
My partner was in the military reserve and was gone when I got there. So I picked up the cases he had, and so I had to get whoever to go out with me or do things. I had to find whoever wasn't doing anything, and so a lot of times Russ would be there after hours and ask me to go with me, and we ended up actually handling a couple of homicides together.
He got promoted, went to Wilshire Division. It was a lot slower than he was used to in his South Bureau Division when dealing with homicides. So I think he went back to South Bureau Homicide briefly, then he was promoted to the Robbery Homicide Division. At that point, I know he was always talking about things just because, it was stuff that everybody would see on the news that he was involved with.
I liked working with him because he was basically the kind of person I like to work with. This is straightforward, straight out there, no nonsense.
Well, when I met him, he was just a really nice guy. Really nice guy, fun-loving guy. We seemed to both of us like sports. We like music. And so one of the first dates he had taken me on was a Beach Boys concert. And that was a lot of fun. And we just loved doing that. We just, before we actually, I don't even know if you call it a real date at that time, we just like doing things together.
Russ was a type of individual that was absolutely tenacious and
Well, like I say, do what you want to do. You keep on doing the good work out there and keep on doing what you're doing. Okay, you make your own decisions. You're grown up. Okay, you make your own decisions. You can take our advice or not. It's up to you.
Not on everything else.
This concludes this interview. It's 19-25 hours.
He had been in homicide quite some time, and so he would solve murders that were old murders, and then he'd solve new ones.
I was interested in somebody else, so I thought, and he came to, it was a guy in a band, and he came to the show with a friend, came to the show and told me that, there, how he felt about me. And I just said, well, I don't think I can, I don't think I feel the same way.
That was a time when we would go to crime scenes and we'd be getting shot at the crime scene while investigating the crime. So it was a very different world.
And I could see the look on his face, and I thought about it, and he had so much more to offer. But then I thought I would lose my best friend. I mean, it was like a best friend. I thought I would lose my friend if we started dating. That wouldn't work out. You can't do both. And little did I know.
He liked to consider himself a crime scene specialist that would really be able to understand absent witnesses, absent anything, what truly could have happened. It's more of a science at that point, and it was something.
You solved a murder case, not for you, not for LAPD, but for the family of the victim, no matter who they were. The family had a right to know what happened to their child, sister, brother, mother, father, whoever. They had the right to know what happened. And Russ was always very good about staying in contact with families all the way through the court system, if there was fortunately an arrest and what have you, all the way through.
I know later on in his life, when he left the LAPD, he sort of was tracking down and also investigating the murder of Tupac along with the murder of Biggie. And I think Russ, say what you want, had a inherent gene within him that he wanted to solve murders for families, right? That's what he did his whole career, right? He solved murders for family members who were murdered.
Every bit of it, he could not get enough of it. It was intense. It certainly would draw everything out of the best out of you.
My personal experience with Russ is that he didn't come to conclusions unless he had evidence. And I mean evidence, not just rumor. He didn't do that. He wasn't that type of a detective. He wasn't going to, come and say somebody did this, unless he had information from somebody, or witness information, or some kind of physical evidence that would tell him that.
In an interview room that should have been taken care of that night, and it didn't. Now it's turned into a criminal investigation. Could have been handled,
But that's fine. That's what
internally, and
that's what you're missing. What are you?
you're part of being a cover-up of a beating. You were told the next day by your informant of what occurred, and nothing. You didn't. Did you go to a supervisor and say, "Hey, my informant tells me that you would beat the shit out"?
I told him exactly what he told me.
Yeah, but did you tell him your opinion? Hey, my informant, I think you would beat the shit out of
my
him.
opinion. Did I tell him?
What?
How can you know? If I'm telling you,
Something like that's what I'm saying. It's reached this far. It's happened in February. Look where we're
how is it occurred?
Russ was out there. I mean, Russ, what you saw was what you got. And Russ was, when anybody met him, a nice guy, shake your hand and hello, nice to meet you. And everybody knew Russ. Anywhere we went, he'd run into somebody that knew him from somewhere, He was always, he never had a hard time talking to anybody. Me, I was more shy. I wasn't that outgoing or whatever. But, him, he'd just go up and just meet somebody, no matter who they were. He'd say, they're just people. I go, don't you get nervous around, like Sylvester Stallone or whatever. Because no, they're just people.
Russell's involvement in the Biggie case had more to do that he was given, he was there in the initial part, and then he was given to do some interviews on an unrelated case, which is the Perez case. And he ended up getting involved in interviews that he thought connected the two things.
He did the Liga Gaines shooting, he was on Biggie, and he was doing Rampart all at the same time.
There were some excessive uses of force that were alleged during the Rafael Perez case. And Russ was asked to go and help the Rampart team investigate some of those excessive uses of force.
I don't think he was an inmate, just a detainee that got beaten in the Rampart station by these two cops that denied it.
And during that time, he found information on Rafael Perez and other people that were involved in that whole mess that he felt related to the case that he had been on earlier, which was the Biggie Smalls case.
It was at that time where also showed that he did start getting a frustration with his co-workers, his peers at Robbery Homicide, because they just treated it as, oh, they were the top guys. They could do whatever they want whenever they wanted when it came to actually doing work. A lot of them spent time on the golf course, during work hours, things like that. He was not down with that at all.
According to Russell, he was concerned that he had become the object of trying to protect the Perez and Max and those kind of people from being investigated thoroughly. And he felt that he now had become the object of the anger of trying to keep him from looking at those things.
When he got into like Rafael Perez and David Mack, they're connected to death row also, and then everything he was finding, and there was 40 pages of a report that they edited down to 2 pages and just kind of like put it to the side. So his work was not an official record. It was this 2-page report. And he said, it was from there I could tell he was getting frustrated, and this was still in 97.
And he was accustomed to investigating things to as far as he wanted to go. And so when somebody blocked him, that really caused him problems.
But, had we been able to aggressively investigate and had the heart to connect the two and do a thorough investigation, I think we probably would have found out more information.
Well, there had been over 20 officers that were working at death row off and on. Some of them came from Compton PD, some of them came from Long Beach PD, some of them came from other law enforcement organizations, including LAPD. So people worked off duty. Cops working in the entertainment industry is historic.
I think the fact that law enforcement officers were working for death row, and that was a scandal in itself, okay?
There were 2 levels of security that were involved in any of these things. One was the gangs themselves would bring their groupies and their little gang entourage there that would act as bodyguards. And then there were civilian bodyguards, and then there were rent-a policeman type situations. And so what happened at the El Rey in that particular case, several of the death row bodyguards were involved in beating up Treetop Pyrus and other gang members were involved in beating up an individual who was from the opposing gangs, the Crips versus the Bloods situation. They ended up killing the guy, and there were several security people. And to this day, I wonder what the heck the homicide detectives or the supervisors of that division, why they didn't investigate that properly and to a full extent. And that causes concern. That's misconduct to me.
The fact that law enforcement officers were working for gangsters, known felons, basically organized crime. because it was no secret that Death Row Records was involved in drug trafficking.
Phil Carson, as an FBI agent, signed Russ Poole up as a confidential source and a confidential informant in the course of his investigation. And Phil Carson has said over and over, Russ Poole was on the right path. Russ Poole was right.
He talked to me about the Tupac thing and he was really concerned because of the investigation and where it was going, and he was getting stonewalled. And I had told him that, you need to be careful the way, don't push it too much because you're going to get blackballed.
Oh, I know he was investigating the missing cocaine out of the evidence locker. He found out who did it. He investigated it, opened a big can of worms. And when certain players, and he got all the players involved, had reported his information to the chief of police, and he was told to turn over all his evidence, all his paperwork, everything, all his files, all his discs, everything to the police. He wanted him to stop investigating right then and there.
And he told me that he was certainly disenfranchised with the fact that he felt that it was not handled the way it should have been handled, and that his reports were rewritten, not to his satisfaction.
Basically just shut him down shut him down. He was crushed. He was, but after being taken off Biggie, the Wallace case, and then having this taken from him, he was, he didn't understand it. He was crushed. He goes, everything he learned was, you get the case, the murder, the body. You go and investigate it. You follow through everything from minute one all the way through court, if you're fortunate enough to make an arrest. And you follow it from A to Z, and then it's done. That's the way he learned. That's the way he was trained. You follow through everything. You follow leads. You don't leave any stone unturned. Even if it doesn't seem important, it could be, and he knew that.
He was a man of honor, integrity. If you look at his, past history within the LAPD, it was stellar. You don't end up in LAPD robbery homicide because you're not a good investigator and you don't have your shit together.
It really is, but he would investigate it and thoroughly. And he just didn't understand. I don't think he comprehended that, why they took that from him. He did the work and it's taken from him again.
Then ultimately, when he brought up to the chief that there's a bunch of vigilante cops, especially in Rampart Division, cops had to have been involved with the killing of Biggie, just because of the connection of all those officers with Death Row Records, and just being told, no, don't investigate them by the chief of police. And then turns out he's linked to these guys too, personally, like his personal life. So
I was upstairs in the bedroom. I don't know if I was getting ready. I don't know what I was doing up there at the time. Doesn't matter. He came home from work. It was early evening. And he comes in and he's, taking his badge off. He's taking everything, puts it on top of his chest of drawers, and he looks at me and goes, you know what? He goes, I think I'm going to quit my job. And I said, what? He goes, I'm going to quit. He goes, I can't, I can't do this. He goes, I can't work like that. He goes, I can't do this. He said, there's something wrong here, and that's not what I signed up for.
Russ Poole was never allowed to actually do his fucking job.
Say you have knowledge of something and you have verification that this knowledge is truthful, it's good, you know what it is, but no one will listen to you and no one will act on it. And you're the kind of person that say, I have absolute video evidence that this guy's a bank robber, and I have him doing a bank robbery, and I have him identified, but nobody will let you arrest him. And so you're looking at it like, wait a minute, I know this guy's a bank robber, but nobody wants me to arrest him. Why? Why can't I go arrest him and solve the crimes? And it can be very frustrating when you're the kind of person that, you know, you need to have, for lack of a better term, closure on your investigations.
And he said, I worked my butt off. Everything's taken away from me. And he said, I just don't understand it. And he goes, I just can't work that way. And I go, well, Russ, you can't quit. I said, how about go to another division, take a desk job for a while, or take some time off. Just take your vacation time or whatever, and just think about this, and before you do anything.
I told Russ, you gotta be careful. But Russ, knowing him, I knew he couldn't just let it go.
He had a year and a half to go before he would get his pension. I said, there's got to be something else you can do. I said, any other division would love to have you. I said, you love patrol, and he didn't really say anything. He just kind of, the next thing I knew, he sent the letter in. I know he had talked to people in the meantime. I know he may have talked to Sergio for all I know. I know he talked to his dad. But I mean, I understood it, but I was scared to death. Well, what were we going to do? Yeah, we got 3 kids to support. I can't support them on my pay. and so it was a really tough time.
All these people they kind of brush it off because they think he's, I don't know, making it up. He's a whistleblower. These guys are sensational. But I don't think so. He had evidence and he needed to follow up on a lot of things and was not allowed to. And so when you're in a position and the chief of police tells you you can't do something, you just can't do it while you're still in the department. So eventually when he left, he was able to do whatever he wanted, and he could continue trying to at least investigate what he could when he was no longer with the department.
Russ Poole's legacy should be a legacy of truth. So anyone that wants to go on social media and say Russ Poole at the end of his career lost his way, Russ Poole did this, Russ Poole did that, you know what? You need to take a walk off a fucking short pier, because all Russ Poole did was good police work.
He was very, very dedicated. And I don't care who the victim was, Russ was going to find out who did it. And that's the way I felt about it, is that I don't care who you are, no one has the right to kill you.
Going back to Russ, when he brought me all of it, when he told me about the show and everything else, I told him, I love you dearly. Show me the money, show me the facts. So I traveled, I went and read 43 books during the course of the next week and a half. And I became convinced that the essence of his concerns were appropriate. I don't care what Russ said. I have to believe what Russ said, now that I have verified it with some documentation. And that's really important to his credibility with me. And my credibility with the science of looking for facts. That's everything.
But Russ Poole, he was solid. And because he was wronged, I think he had like 18 years in. Yeah. And what he went through and what LAPD did to him was horrible. Yeah. One of the hills that I will always stand on is when I hear people like Reggie Jr. or Greg Kading that just go after Russ and try to make up these false narratives about him, and Russ isn't here to kind of protect himself or back himself. I'll be there to protect his name, because he was a good man, he was a great detective, and he was wronged by LAPD.
So what this looks like to me is a continued cycle of failure. The first time that they tried to push this narrative, they tried to do it through the Vegas investigation, and it didn't work. The next time that they tried to push the narrative, they tried to push it through a reporter by the name of Chuck Phillips with a newspaper called the LA Times, and that didn't work. They tried it again in the Wallace investigation by trying to push the narrative on Russell Poole, the LAPD detective working the Wallace investigation, and that didn't work either. So they tried one last time to push the Orlando Anderson narrative by introducing a new character by the name of Dwayne Keith Davis, Orlando Anderson's uncle. This theory was pushed forward by an ex-LAPD cop by the name of Greg Kading in his book called Murder Rap.
One of the problems that happened out in Las Vegas was that there was a lot of mistrust with local law enforcement in Los Angeles, particularly Compton PD.
Right.
You've got Reggie Wright employing Compton police officers working death row. Vegas was not sure who to trust, not sure whose team people were on.
Greg Kading enjoyed a personal relationship with the U.S. prosecuting attorney who was prosecuting the Ramos case, and his name was Tim Searight. One day, Greg Kading approached Tim Searight and asked Tim Searight if he could have a proffer session with a man by the name of Dwayne Davis, because Mr. Davis was going to offer some additional information on a drug case that they happened to be working. It just so happened that this Dwayne Davis might also have information related to the murder of Tupac Shakur. Now, of course, Mr. Searight could care less about a state crime. He's a federal prosecutor. So a murder case and the murder of Tupac Shakur had been 20 years old by that point. Mr. Searight didn't care about that, but he did care about the drug case that they were trying to prosecute. And for that reason, he let Mr. Kading go ahead and do that.
One of the problems here is there's a lot of reference going on to the FBI or the feds, but you got to remember that this is not a federal investigation. This is basically isolated to Las Vegas. It's an isolated murder, and the feds don't have any authority within it. So the federal agencies are not going to just take over a murder investigation unless it's part of a much broader investigation.
I'll interject what you're saying. First of all, I'm a retired police officer. I was the undercover agent for the FBI for 4 years for death row records in regards to racketeering investigation. My supervisor was Dan McMullen, the FBI Wilshire office. Dan is, I believe, now in Seattle, which you can verify. John Ciccione, the ATF agent, was also my supervisor. My job, as I said, was to infiltrate death row for racketeering violations. There was another officer from Long Beach PD who worked undercover.
I met with Kevin Hackey on numerous occasions. He has stated publicly that he was an FBI informant, so I'm not going to tell you he wasn't. I had nothing but good experiences with Kevin. He seemed to provide information that I was able to go out and independently corroborate. Yeah. But the relationship that I had with Kevin was nothing but good and positive, and the information that he provided. There's a reason that he had a working relationship with the FBI and the ATF.
Subsequently, Reggie Wright was my partner. I'd known Reggie for many years. Based upon that, that's why I was called in to do this investigation. Okay, but what you basically just said, the FBI did take over the case. And obviously, as most of you do know, there is no statute of limitations on murder.
I was aware of all that. I didn't want to front you off. But nonetheless, you do have to understand, the FBI it does not have jurisdiction over a singular murder. Okay, I'm explaining this to you so you know. Okay, they were looking at something much broader.
Let me correct you on one thing, okay? Tupac Shakur was a suspect in a racketeering investigation.
There's the key word.
So at that point in time, it became federal jurisdiction.
Okay, you clarified that that's the key word.
Mr. Kading was never in charge of the Tupac case. In 2006, LAPD allowed him to lead a so-called task force on the Biggie Smalls case, which was Russell Poole's case in 1997. So he puts together his own suicide squad of detectives, and rounding out the roster,
You guessed it, Tim Brennan.
Kading's investigation didn't seem very open-minded. Within 2 months of starting the task force, Chuck Phillips of the LA Times is already laying out the roadmap. And 4 years later, they end up at the same place they started. Tim Brennan's Anderson narrative.
So I was working in the public corruption unit out of the LAF, or LA Field Division. I was doing police corruption cases. I was involved in 2 major police corruption cases involving LAPD officers. A good friend of mine was one of the co-case agents on the David Mack bank robbery. And so I was very knowledgeable in all those areas. And one night I was watching it was in MTV or VH1, and I saw a documentary on the Biggie Smalls murder, and they were talking about, you know, LAPD officers possibly being involved. And as I'm watching it, a lot of it made sense, and then some of it, I was going, hold it, that's not correct because of my knowledge from working these other cases. So I went to my bosses, told them about this. I wrote up about like a, I don't know, a 15 or 14 page report analysis of kind of summarizing these cases and how they're tied together and how it would bleed over into the killing of Biggie Smalls, and what I believed was the orchestration of LAPD that was involved in committing that crime. And I met with all my bosses. They read through it, and they said, there's something here. And again, they decide if there's enough there to open up a full field investigation. I don't decide that on my own. So they said, yeah, you know what? There is something here. We're moving forward on this. And so they opened up a new case. They made me the case agent and just started doing the investigation then. I've never met Greg Kading. I've never talked to Greg Kading. I know the FBI had one person that was part of that task force. I've talked to a couple people that were on that task force, and their jurisdiction was not the Tupac murder. It just wasn't. And Kading, for whatever reason, started kind of going down that alleyway.
But as Detective Kading was trailblazing a case that was arguably Las Vegas jurisdiction, back at home, his Torres Ramos case was in full nuclear meltdown.
I've been known and still am as a gang expert in the defense world also. So they called me and I went down and talked to them about the case and told them, yeah, I'd be glad to, to work on it with you and be more than happy. So I got retained and started working on it and got into it and found out that, well, I don't understand the gang issues. There's no real gang involvement in this. And I'm basically there as a police practices expert at that time in court. And so they're having discussion and testimony about, informants and things and Kading and all that. And he's up there and testifying went on. And then the defense calls me and I get on the witness stand and they're asking me. And I said, yeah, this is how you deal with informants. This is a department protocol, and there's a manual. There wasn't when I was on, but there is now. And the judge turned over and asked me. He says, well, what is your assessment, or how do you feel that Detective Kading handling of these informants? And I said, he sounded like he was totally out of control and totally out of policy to me, Your Honor. He did not follow the correct procedure. And he goes, okay. And then the judge told the U.S. attorney that I want to see the informant manual. Well, there isn't one, Your Honor. Kading's telling the federal prosecutor there is no such thing. Well, we know there is. And he said, I want that manual in my office in 1 hour. And they went and got it. And so that basically put Kading in a real cross, because he has testified that there is no such thing. And there was. But the federal prosecutor believed Kading that there wasn't anything, and there was. And then you saw exactly what I laid out as to how it's to be handled. Well, come to find out, and I listened to a lot of the tapes of him and his informants. Why he taped himself, I'll never know. Because he's promising these guys houses and money and all these things. I need you to say this, I need you to say, and then I have phone conversations of the informant telling other guys, yeah, all I had to do, I have to say this, and that. I'm at 400 grand, I'm gonna get a $500,000 home, I'm gonna be living there, I'm gonna be living high on the hog, I'm gonna be doing it, bro, and all this. And I'm like, you can't promise people anything. You can't buy informants. You can't offer them anything for that. You have to tell them that I can't
give you any. I have no authority to give you anything. I will promise
Who
you.
would believe that? It's so you're going to get $500,000 if you testify like that. Who would believe him anyway? I mean, really, are they that gullible?
Well, it was on tape. You didn't have to believe him. It was on tape. That's why I don't understand why he taped himself when he visited these guys alone. He never had a partner with him, and he never had a witness or anything, but he taped himself. He even taped himself on the phone, and I just don't understand the mentality of someone that's a seasoned officer or detective that he knows they're taping this. My understanding is that when the case was, almost all the charges were dismissed. There were some minor bookkeeping things the feds had on Torres, and he got some real tiny conviction on some housekeeping and bookkeeping things or something, and everything else was dismissed. The murder, the drug, all that stuff was all kicked out. Was not guilty by jury, and then the judge informed Kading that I don't ever want to know or see or hear of you being in the federal court building, you're never allowed in my courtroom ever again. And made mention to the U.S. attorney that he feels that they should contact the department and let them know, what had transpired here.
Were you around when they said that?
Yeah.
You were there?
Yeah, and so that's all I know. And then I never saw or heard of Kading again.
Right.
I've seen this with other detectives at LAPD on other cases in state court where they were caught in a lie on a witness stand, and the judge whitewashed it as they were just embellishing. They weren't really lying. And then when it gets back to the department, they slap their hand like, well, you can't be in homicide for 3 or 4 weeks, and then he's right back in. It's like nothing happens. Like any public entity, they don't want to take a hit in public that puts the reputation or anything of the department down. And so it's a common practice with just about anywhere. They don't want to take that kind of hit.
Here's what happens when something like that happens, is they give him a choice to retire, resign, or leave, or we'll continue this investigation. Now, if they do an investigation, when he comes to federal court, he's representing not only the case that he's working, he's representing the Los Angeles Police Department. So internal affairs can conclude their investigation any way they want to conclude it. And he was forced to leave. And so in their conclusion, they figure they got nothing to lose. Okay, the suspects, it would be an embarrassment for the LAPD to reveal that their detective on this case was responsible for releasing this killer. Because you got to remember, this Kading worked on other cases. So if they were not to clear him and condemn him and this and that, they would have problems with all of his other cases. So it's a shame that that's the way the system is sometimes, but in my opinion, they basically just cleared it on there. He's no longer on the police department, so they don't have to worry about him anymore. However, if they do an investigation and find he's a corrupt officer and he's lied on this, well, maybe he lied on all the other cases. They didn't want to open that can of worms.
Caught lying on the witness stand, it would have been the end of my career. I would have been fired. They wouldn't have whitewashed, they would have fired me. Because as that point of you lying, you are no longer any use to the department because you cannot testify on any case anymore. You're not trustworthy anymore. They can't use you anymore because you've already lied on the record in a courtroom, and therefore you have no credibility anymore, so therefore they can't use you.
He has no credibility. I couldn't trust him to work with him on the police department. He's self-absorbed, just like the LA Times reporter Chuck Phillips.
And while all this was said, there was a secret tape recording made of the session.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the whole tape thing. I'll tell you this. The whole basis for his book, Murder Rap book, was that he did a proffer session with Keith Davis, Keefy D. next to Jerry Hawkins in terms of distribution and all that. And the DEA was interested in Hawkins, and they were interviewing Keith Davis, Crawford deal about that, and the FBI was there, and FBI does not allow their conversations to be recorded.
Correct.
Do you know that for a fact?
I've been in countless proffers with the FBI, the DEA, and all these task force. I worked for a federal defense attorney and all these gang RICO things, and then all that. I'm at these proffers because I've convinced our guy to help himself by giving me information, so I'm there. And yeah, the FBI doesn't want to tape record their interviews because they don't want people to know their interview techniques. I'm like, I didn't understand that, because so it made no sense other than you just don't want you on tape, getting late.
But they made that a policy. I mean, the FBI did, we're not taping the processor. So when a Kading shows up with a recorded conversation or a recording of the proffer session itself and uses this recording as evidence and publishes it in his book, sends it to the LA Weekly, sends this tape everywhere, it cannot possibly be a legitimate recording. I mean, it's a recording of the proffer session.
Yeah,
but
it could be a legitimate taping, but one he did without telling anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm the private investigator. I got video pens and all kinds of nonsense. You could tape things without anybody knowing.
Right.
And if he taped it without telling them, then he's in. I mean, he's nobody now. He's just a civilian. But
for him to take recordings that maybe he recorded on his own and then take those recordings and then put them in or talk about that in a book or talk that to a documentary, I can't even get started on how horrible that is. I don't have that personal vendetta, even though some people may think that, against Greg Kading. I have a vendetta against any police officer that does the shit that Greg Kading has done, because it's wrong and it's incorrect and it gives law enforcement a bad name.
I can tell you this much. I believe after this movie comes out, you're going to see dozens of people that are going to come out of the woodwork. That was what we started to find out, was the more people that we talked to, the more people started to have information that would have never have said anything.
Well, I don't know if people will be able to sleep happier, but they'll have more information. There will be some information that has come out that people never knew of, and that's mainly what the picture is about. We're releasing this information showing that this investigation from Las Vegas, they missed some people.
Are you afraid of your life now?
Time out, sports fans. Greg, there is some information that we want to make available from the movie. Frank was not privy to a lot of the interviews, and a lot of the information were done without his involvement. He wasn't present for some of the interviews. So I can say that there was some information that maybe he even saw later on after your call, because I was aware that you did call. Also, I think there was a little bit of confusion at the time because the information was regarding the Christopher Wallace investigation, and we weren't really sure that anything that we had would be directly relevant, and that was more of a judgment call. So if whatever we can do to reach out, we want to, because as you said, we'd all like to see this thing come to a head, really.
Yes. Granted.
You know, really.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem, sure.
But even early in his investigation, Kading was already making his frame fit the picture. And the likes of Frank Alexander, Kevin Hackey, and Michael Moore were clearly not a part of it. Anytime anyone goes up against the narrative, anytime new information is presented, there is an immediate response to try to spin the narrative back to it was Orlando Anderson and Keith Davis in the white Cadillac. And I think that once people figure out who the man behind the curtain is, they'll never think the same way about the murder of Tupac Shakur and Death Row Records.
Reggie's a big boy, I can take it. I ain't gonna tell no illegal acts. I only put mayors in jail, crooked mayors. I only go to the FBI on crooked mayors. Yeah. Niggas that I don't like.
because you know I'm very, 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 y'all ain't learned anything about me, I'll get you. I'm very vindictive. That's me. I'll get you.